had an extra question posted on one of the YouTube videos of the live Q&As. I'm just going to get that up on the screen now. So it was asking about planning training in the week with higher and lower intensity days. And the specific part of the question I want to go into today is this. I'm trying to come up with a way to keep the intensity low for Muay Thai training on the low days. What about just hitting a little easier and ensuring that my heart rate doesn't exceed, say, 140 beats per minute? So if you've ever tried to wear a heart rate monitor and do a Muay Thai training session and keep your heart rate below 140 beats per minute, it's actually really difficult by the time you've actively involved arms and legs as well. Heart rate just shoots up really quickly. And I want to take this moment to clarify that there's a difference in my mind between Muay Thai sessions that are a hybrid technical and tactical training session and also a cardio conditioning session, metabolic energy systems. That's all going on in one. And what we're looking for with strength and conditioning are to plug the gaps, bring something in that you're not getting from the Muay Thai training. So there is a certain amount of cardio conditioning that we get from Muay Thai. It's typically what I'd call threshold training for the majority of it. So using a cardio conditioning method that limits your heart rate to 140 beats per minute, that is more of a cardio conditioning session, more of a cardiac output training method, if you follow Joel Jamieson's work there, where the objective is to increase cardiac capacity. So eccentric hypertrophy of the left ventricle of the heart, all of that cool stuff. You don't necessarily get that just training Muay Thai. If you wanted to use Muay Thai to achieve that sort of training, just very gentle shadow boxing is about all you can really do to keep your heart rate at 140 beats per minute or lower. But what I was talking about in this Q&A video was structuring the training week with high and low days. And those high and low days are relative. So to talk about what would be, in my mind, a moderate or high Muay Thai training session compared to a low one, I'm going to discuss the difference here. And this is really what this question is about. So for me, a moderate or high intensity Muay Thai session would be at or above your anaerobic threshold heart rate. And if you're not sure what that is, I'll post a link to a video where I talk about how you can test and establish that if you're using a heart rate monitor. But generally, it's around 80 to 90% of your maximum heart rate or above. And that would be a high intensity Muay Thai training session. And it would typically include more fight-paced bag work, pad work and sparring, include more finisher and burnout drills and shorter rest intervals between rounds, and rounds would be the same length as your fight. Whereas your lower intensity Muay Thai days would typically be below your anaerobic threshold for most of the session. The rounds would be longer, say 4 or 5 minutes, and there'd be more generous rest intervals in between the rounds too. Punctuating with heavy shots and finishes is okay, but the overall intensity of the session should still feel pretty low, and the emphasis should be more technical and tactical in nature. Hence the longer rounds, so you've got more time to play and keeping it more cardiorespiratory rather than pushing into threshold all the time. It's important to balance out the lower and the high intensity work in terms of the strength and conditioning along with the Muay Thai, but also in terms of the general to specific in your fight camp too. So further from the fight, be lower intensity, longer rounds, more technical and tactical in nature, learning new stuff and drilling it. Closer to the fight is more about pushing your existing skill level under fatigue to make sure it stays robust. So not all of your Muay Thai sessions need to be high intensity. And hopefully you understand now how to keep a lower intensity session at a lower intensity, predominantly below your anaerobic threshold heart rate. So below 80% of your maximum heart rate for most of the session. And that way you can stop it kind of spiraling up and turning into just another high session. And remember, there's no problem with some temporary little spikes, but most of the session should be down at that lower intensity. And it's key to remember that progress only happens if there's enough recovery to allow for that adaptation to improve. And lower intensity Muay Thai actually means a greater volume of technical and tactical practice. And of course, your goal is to get better, not just tired.